This time, our goal is to clean up these production props, like I said in my last video. I have about an hour before I have to leave, and let's see how much I can get done. So for this video, I wanted to start off by talking about what I've actually learned so far when it comes to making a vlog and putting a video like this together. Lesson number 1, which I learned the absolute hard way, is to always double check if your phone or camera is actually recording. I literally spent half an hour cleaning up the initial mess from those 2 folders that I showed you at the beginning of the video. But right after I finished categorizing everything into little groups, I looked over and realized, oh no, I forgot to press the record button. So the shots you're seeing right now are actually from after the initial round of cleaning. Now I'm just further sorting things out into even smaller subgroups so I know exactly what I need to get from Muji, like what sizes of pockets I'm going to need. But yeah, mental note to self and to anyone else, always make sure the camera is rolling before you start doing anything. On top of that, there were a lot of unexpected technical issues from last time. I mean, I do have experience working with video, but shooting in this specific format on an iPhone was a whole different situation that I never experienced. For example, I didn't realize my phone was recording in HDR by default. When I imported the footage into Premiere Pro, the colors completely shifted and everything looked pale. Even after Googling around and changing the color space settings, it still looked washed out. So this time, I made sure to turn off HDR and the colors should look a lot more vibrant, saturated, and normal. Aside from the technical side of things, I also realized I desperately need to practice how I structure my sentence and how I talk. When I was doing the first round of recordings, whether it was talking directly to the camera or doing the voiceovers, I was honestly just being lazy. I didn't want to write a script, so I was just testing my luck and rolling with it. But during editing, I was like, oh my god, I have to cut out so many filler words. Why did I say, so many times? Took up way too much time. So now that I know this, I'm editing out those long sentences. If I stopped midway through a sentence because I was overthinking what to say, I would just pause and repeat the whole phrase from the beginning, so it will be a lot easier to clean up in post-production. And for the voiceover narrations, I've actually been using a bit of a shortcut. I wouldn't call it cheating, but I've been using, you know what I'm talking about, to help me out. Because basically, I will watch the footage and just do a loose think out loud voiceover, speaking whatever comes to mind. I'll copy the transcript from voice notes on my phone, ask you know what I'm talking about to help me reorganize and clean up my thoughts into a more cohesive paragraph. From there, I'll tweak and change things so it will actually match how I talk usually, naturally. This has been a lifesaver because trying to manually write out a script for 40 or 50 minutes of video would just take way too much effort for me because there are other things I have to do right now. Making video is just not a priority, unfortunately. I just have a ton of information in my head at any given moment as well, and it just takes me a while to organize my thoughts. And it's not even a language barrier thing. It's just how my brain works. That said, I'm still trying to be very cautious and conscious about how I use this kind of technology. I want to stay mindful and make sure I'm not abusing it. And it's just crazy because I was telling a friend the other day that my very first rough draft of the first video was actually 2 hours long. At first, I thought, hey, this is a documentation project, so maybe I should keep my natural way of speaking. Filler words and stumbles, they can be included. But as I sat there editing, I realized that even I didn't have the patience to sit through a 10-second silence waiting for my own brain to figure out what I wanted to say. If I can't even stand watching myself, there's no way anyone else will. So I decided to cut a ton of things out. Another thing I realized while listening back to my previous videos is how I enunciate. Honestly, I mumble a lot and I tend to swallow a ton of sounds and syllables. It's like I'm French, just omitting sounds here and there. I think growing up, I was unconsciously trained to believe that fluency meant speaking as fast as humanly possible. To achieve that speed, I minimized my mouth and lip movements, which just made my pronunciation super unclear and definitely not the most pleasant thing to listen to. So for this video, I've been actively telling myself to speak a little louder and more clear, which forces me to actually move my mouth and fully articulate every single sound. This bigger album you're seeing here is an actual prop that we use in our film. It already holds a lot of photos, so I decided to put some of the other photos that we use as prop into this big folder as well. Back in the days, my former manager actually gave me a really precious piece of advice right after I got out of college. We were working at a company in Japan where the vast majority of people were Japanese, but the official working language was English. Because we were all working remotely with team members from all over the world, most of whom were non-native English speakers with completely different accents, she once sat me down and said, "Look, you're incredibly fluent and you have a great accent, but you need to understand that fluency does not equal effective communication." She explained that speaking at lightning speed or dropping fancy vocabulary doesn't mean you're being effective, especially in a global non-native environment. True communication means slowing down, phrasing things clearly, and being straightforward so everyone is on the same page. The smartest people aren't the ones who know the most obscure words. They are the ones who can explain the most complex concepts using the simplest words. Going back to our simultaneous interpretation analogy that I mentioned in the last video, this exact concept of fast talking versus effective communication actually reminds me of something I experienced firsthand. I was working as a coordinator at a tech event between two companies, one American and one Chinese. We had simultaneous interpretation going from English to Chinese. One of the American engineers spoke at absolute lightning speed, and both our interpreters were working their heads off to just keep up. Eventually, even one of the Chinese delegates had to stop him and be like, "Excuse me, could you please slow down a little bit?" Now, obviously, these engineers are incredibly brilliant, and they just have a million things in their brain that they are trying to get out. But if you can't make your client or your partner understand what you're trying to do, how are you supposed to push the business forward? I've seen other cases where the event monitor, who are more considerate, they will actually pause to let interpreters finish what they're translating so they can keep up with the speed and not miss important information. I'm back from whatever we were doing out there today. We went to location scouting and it was fun. So in the afternoon, I have already sorted out everything from the folder except the receipts. I have sorted them into different categories, and what it's like now, everything is paper clips into different groups. And on my way back today, I also went to Muji. This is one pocket. The entire thing is a pocket. And I also got A5 slim ones with one pocket and two pocket, and both of them comes with sliders. And then I also got this non-bulky pocket holder. I'll show you later why I got this for. Let's get started. At the end of the day, people always say that language is just a tool and the ultimate goal is to make sure everyone understands each other. I have no question for that. Fluency is only useful if it actually aids that connection. If you are a super fluent English speaking from the United States talking to a non-native speaker here in Japan, but you don't adjust your speed or you start throwing around heavy slang and idioms that only Americans would understand, that fluency actually becomes a barrier. Language is a tool, but it requires a lot of active attention and constant alignment between you and the person you're talking to for that tool to actually work. That's my hot take for the day. Actually, not that hot. I've also been reflecting a lot lately on my own language learning journey, especially the weird way my fluency actually has different coverage areas. For example, English is actually the language I use the most because I live with Luke and we speak in English. Even though we both speak Korean and Japanese, we don't talk to each other in those languages. There's other reasons to why, and I do want to explain more about that, but maybe that's for another video. While Mandarin Chinese is my native tongue and Shanghainese is what I spoke at home with my family, but since I live in Japan, I don't get many chances to speak Chinese on a daily basis anymore. It's mostly for texting or chatting with friends. Then there's Japanese, which I'd say I'm fluent and comfortable in. I use it for work and I can definitely hold my own in an argument if I get into a tricky situation. Despite that I'm comfortable in both Chinese, Japanese, and English, the coverage is different. For example, since I studied chemistry in high school in English, I understand the concepts of English. If you ask me for a specific chemical concept or a compound name in Chinese or Japanese, I will have absolutely no clue because there's a chance that I've never heard about them or those terminologies in Chinese or Japanese. On the flip side, because I never lived with a Japanese native speaker, my colloquial daily life vocabulary has some random gaps. For example, the other day I literally had to Google the word for the medicine that kills cockroach. With all my rambling over language and language related things, it all tied right back into the clutter that we're cleaning up here. It's specifically this film we shot in Seoul. I've studied Korean for quite some time now, and the entire film was actually shot in Korean. Now, I definitely didn't have the skills to translate my own script into Korean, so I wrote it in English and had Luke's friend help us translate it. That production was such a fascinating linguistic experience for me. On set in Seoul, I was at the point where I could understand most of the time what people are saying because we weren't talking about anything too crazy and I'm familiar enough with most of the domain-specific filmmaking terms, but I couldn't really speak. But our crew was an amazing mix. We had native Korean speakers who had lived in China and spoke fluent Mandarin but no English. People who spoke Japanese way better than English. And my own friends who spoke a mix of English, Chinese, and Japanese. We didn't have a single universal language on that set, yet we managed to communicate by constantly bouncing back and forth between different languages. It was incredible, and honestly, this exact phenomenon of language and connection was a major theme in the film itself. I wish I had more time to talk about the film, but it's still a work in progress. I'm forever grateful to everyone who helped us, but being a perfectionist makes the editing process a real struggle. I want it to be so good, something the entire crew can be proud of. And that pressure gave me such a mental block that it actually took me almost a year just to sit down and start editing it. I'm just someone who gets anxious really easily, and it's tough. But in a way, working on this vlog and putting myself out there on YouTube is my way of trying to break out of that perfectionist shell. When you do something for the first time, there's absolutely no way it's gonna go perfect. While I was editing that first video, I had to keep repeating to myself, stop chasing perfection. Just roll with it and put it out there. Even when the HDR color issue was really stressing me out a little bit, I forced myself not to fall back into that toxic perfectionist mindset. Even if a video doesn't turn out amazing or get a ton of views, the point is to just keep doing it and learning from the process. And honestly, I really did learn so much from that first video. And in the long run, I believe I will grow through the process. I just gotta trust it. Trust the process. So right now I'm just cleaning up whatever I've collected over the past few days from going to different places. It's crazy how they accumulate so fast. So I'm trying to update my folders before things get completely out of hand again. Among the things that I've gathered, there are these 2 postcards from a film Luke and I watched together recently. It's called That Day on the Beach by Edward Young, which was actually his first ever feature film back in 1983. They recently did a 4K restoration, so they've been screening it here in Japan. The film itself was absolutely incredible, but one thing I really want to talk about in this video is that I actually caught a few translation mistakes in the subtitles. Subtitle translation is always tricky. Because of human reading speeds and screen limitations, you generally cannot exceed 2 lines, and you have to compress a ton of spoken information into a tiny space. I noticed that in Japanese subtitles, there are a lot of omission going on. Sometimes cutting things down actually makes sense. For instance, in one scene, a character was listing off a bunch of places. Japan, Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, but in the Japanese subtitle, not all places were included. In that case, it's fine because they just needed to fit the character limit, and the specific list of places didn't really impact the plot anyway because they're just examples. But I noticed a couple of flat-out mistranslations. In one line, a character was talking about how they don't like networking or after-work drinking parties, but the subtitle translated as, I don't like art. I think because they were talking about ikebana, aka flower arrangement, right before that, and because the Chinese word for drinking parties and art could sound super similar were spoken quickly. The translator probably just misheard it. So the original line in Chinese went like, 你以为我喜欢应酬啊? So the word 应酬 means after work drinking parties or networking parties. However, I think there's a high chance that the translator misheard the word as 你以为我喜欢艺术啊? So the word 艺术 means art. 应酬 and 艺术, I guess they could sound similar sometimes when spoken fast to a non-native speaker. While it didn't ruin plot, it was definitely a glaring mistake. The other mistranslations, though, actually could change how you understand the film. Near the end, the wife is talking about her marriage and says in Chinese that this is going to be a new beginning for us. But the Japanese subtitle translated as, if I remember correctly, my new beginning. There is a shift in the meaning. Changing the we to an I completely alters the implication of where her marriage stands. Then, right at the very end of the movie, one of the characters comments on how the protagonist has finally grown from a young girl into a perfect woman or perfect lady. 从少女到完美的妇人. It was a very specific gendered and honestly unusual phrasing in Chinese, so it's highly likely that the filmmaker chose those words quite deliberately. Yet the Japanese subtitle translated it as, she is no longer a young girl, but an adult. While it gets the point of her maturing across, omitting that specific nuance of becoming a perfect woman felt a bit wrong. And it's not like they were out of screen space for that line, so they definitely didn't need to cut it. On a side note, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to report the mistranslation I spotted in the film. Maybe I should email the distribution company in Japan for this film, or that's also something I have to figure out. Also, just a quick disclaimer, I really want to go back and double check those subtitles myself just to 100% verify what I found, but if any of you have seen the film with the Japanese subtitles and felt different about it, definitely let me know. I'm totally open to discussion and would love to hear your thoughts. So here, right now in the camera, I'm trying to clean up whatever is in the shared scrapbook cases. I realized during my first round of cleaning that the bigger and the smaller pieces are just completely mixed together. It makes it so hard to keep track of anything, and if we were ever wanting to sit down and update the scrapbook, there's really a high chance that we won't even be able to find where anything is anymore. So I went ahead and bought a different type of folder so I can at least loosely categorize everything by shape, size, and what it's used for. Even if we aren't planning on doing any collages anytime soon, at least the next time we actually want to work on it, we know exactly where to find everything. Now going back to what we were talking about earlier. Artistic and literal translation is honestly very tricky in general. There is just so much cultural context to juggle. Sometimes certain concepts just doesn't exist in the target language, or you have to dance around the topics that could be considered sensitive. I'm not here to judge, but it also actually reminds me of another experience I had at a film festival recently. So, two of my friends' film got selected for a Women in Cinema category at a film festival in Tokyo, which was amazing. Every single film in that block was made by a woman and focused almost entirely on female protagonists. You barely saw a single guy on screen. During the Q&A, the moderator, who was a bilingual guy fluent in both English and Japanese, asked my friends about the inspiration behind their film. My friend, she explained that she was actually inspired by her younger brother, but decided to make the character a younger sister because, as she put it, she just doesn't know and doesn't want to write male characters. And she wanted to focus purely on sisterhood. I thought it was such a funny, honest, and highly relevant comment for a panel dedicated to women in cinema. But when the moderator translated her answer back into Japanese, he completely omitted the entire part about how she did not want to write about men. He literally just said this film was inspired by her younger brother, highly summarizing her thoughts and leaving out all the juicy context. Now, as an interpreter and translator myself, I get that you sometimes have to condense things because time limits, but in this case, it really felt like he was filtering the message based on what he thought a Japanese audience should hear. Almost like he was tiptoeing around something that could get sensitive in Japan, which is the issue around gender. If he actually didn't omit the information because he was worried about it being too sensitive and he didn't do it on purpose, then from a professional standpoint, I think that is not a great interpreter because you are missing information and blocking the audience from understanding filmmakers' actual voice and intent. And that wasn't even the only thing he cut out. Later on, my friend was explaining the background of the power outage in her country, pointing out that a specific private company wasn't doing its job and basically condemning them for it. This was such a crucial cultural context because electricity outage was actually plot points in the film itself. But the moderator decided to omit the part where my friend was condemning the company too. Again, probably because he felt criticizing a private utility company was a little too political or controversial for a Japanese audience. Honestly, those information the moderator omitted to me felt very crucial to understanding the film and the filmmakers. I don't know exactly why he chose to filter out those key details, but it was quite frustrating for me. These aren't just random side notes, they're crucial to actually understanding the film and the person who made it. Just from that one panel I attended, either way, no matter if he's omitting the information on purpose or not, I honestly think maybe the festival would want to hire a professional interpreter to do this job so that all messages can get across from the international filmmakers. So here I am finally finishing up my cleaning for the day. I'm wrapping things up with the receipts from the film shoot in Seoul. I have been delaying to clean them just because I really don't like dealing with receipts. But anyway, I throw away a ton of unnecessary paper here and there as well. Since I have a few leftover pockets from my shopping trip in Muji today, I figured why not just clean up the Motsinabe stuff too while I'm at it. It actually turned out to be way easier than I expected since it was just a bunch of business cards and receipts. I loosely packed them together, put them in a bag, and attached it right into my multi-use A5 folder. There are definitely still other things I need to sort through, but I'm getting pretty tired for today. I've been working on this and staying super focused for a really long time now, so yeah, I think I'm gonna call it a day. Okay. Progress check. I think today was a lot easier because there were less things that I need to clean. And first of all, this is the folder of all the production scrap papers. There are photos, there are posters that we used, some of the prints that I cleaned out, I put it away in the bigger print folder. These are the smaller ones, smaller things. And I have some other stuff stored away in this big folder. So I have the receipts and the script and my sketchbook in this. Because they're bigger, so I put this in this bigger folder. Because I was really in a flow, so I decided to also clean up the bag that has all the scrap materials for me and Luke's shared scrapbook. Everything is categorized and sorted out like this. So you got all of these. And it's still a little bulky, but manageable. So. And now we only have the scrapbook in the bag. Some of the bigger booklets and papers are still here. I decided to lay them out like this in the drawer that the scrapbook goes to. There we are. Yeah, I think I'm getting the hang of how to clean things. I still have other things that I plan to clean. For example, this bag. This belongs to Luke. It's all Luke's scrap paper. I will definitely take a slightly different approach because he does not need something so laid out as I do. So I think I'll go with the similar approach that I did for the production papers. Though I don't necessarily lay out everything, but I group them together and I put them all in a folder like this with different bags. So it's easier to see what's in there when you flip it open. Stay tuned.